Hi there, I'm David Barry from the National Post, and I am here in the nicest part of the National Post office to talk about the Juno Awards, which this year are in the nicest part of Canada, Hamilton, Ontario. This weekend in the paper we have a big feature on the Juno's Breakthrough Artist Award. Now this is usually a pretty fraught award for music award shows. They get it sort of a bit wrong a lot, or they give it to someone who's been in it for 10 years or something like that. But the Junos have kind of an interesting history with this Breakthrough Artist Award. It's changed names several times. It's been given to both men and women, or just solo artists and groups, and so on and so forth. Anyway though, I'm here to tell you about 5 sort of interesting little historical quirks of the Breakthrough Artist Award. Our number 5 weird tidbit is about Priscilla Wright. Now back in 1955, she had a decent hit in the States with The Man in the Raincoat. And she played in bands after that for a little while singing. Then she took a big long break. And she came back in the 80s with a few singles, and in 1992 with an album. She got nominated as the most promising artist for that year, well over the age of 50, and then put out only one more album before she retired entirely, or at least she's on another break and hasn't put out another one. But congratulations to Priscilla Wright, who is probably the oldest nominee for the most promising artist Juno. The 4th interesting tidbit is Tal Bachman and his second career. Tal Bachman won this award in 2000 after his big hit She's So High. You might remember it was on the radio everywhere, it charted in Canada and the States, and then he won this award. Now he didn't really do a lot musically after, he only had one more full album. But in the late 2000s, he became a bit of a political pundit. He talked about the election in Canada on Global, and in the States, he became a bit notable for his ex-Mormon beliefs and what it was like to leave the Church of Latter-day Saints. Now that's especially sort of funny because, as you might know, Tal Bachman's father is Randy Bachman, formerly of the Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive and so on. But it was actually Bachman's Mormon beliefs that drove a bit of a wedge between him and his bandmates in the Guess Who and led him to go take off on his own and start Bachman Turner Overdrive. So maybe that's a little disappointing for Dad. So our next weird quirk is kind of the classic absurdist problem with these awards, which is that quite frequently they can get wrong who turns out to be the most promising artist that year. Like for instance, in 1987, Rita McNeil won it, which is a big deal. Rita McNeil was sort of the queen of East Coast music, but the person who lost was Celine Dion, who went on to become just an ever so slightly bigger Canadian singer. But at least Celine only lost the award once. Bryan Adams, who is still to this day the biggest selling Canadian male rock singer of all time, lost it twice in 1980 and 1981. It's fair to say he's probably a bigger name than either of the people that beat him. If number 3 was 2 people who you'd really expect to get this award, this one is a bit of a surprise. Rick James was nominated for this award in 1979. Now, Rick James was actually born in Buffalo and went on to become one of the kings of funk in the early 80s, mostly in the States. But for a little while, he lived in Canada. He joined the Navy in the 60s, but to get out of going to Vietnam, he deserted and moved to Toronto. While he was there, he played in a band called the Minor Birds with Neil Young, and then was eventually thrown into jail for deserting the Navy. After that, he moved to California, but because he had connections in Canada, his album was actually released on Motown Canada, and that's why, of all people, Rick James was only nominated. He actually did lose the award, despite the fact he went on to be kind of an important artist. And our most interesting tidbit from the Breakthrough Artist Juno is someone who I think has a claim on being the most interesting man in Canadian music. Paul Jans started off playing in a gospel rock band with his brothers in Europe. He actually appeared on Germany's version of the Eurovision Song Contest, trying to get in there. And then he came back to Canada and started releasing albums, and he won the award in 1985. He actually had a pretty good career after that. He released several albums. He had a really big hit in 1990 with Every Little Tear You Cry, which you might know if I were to sing it for you, which I'm not going to do again. But the really interesting thing is what happens after that. The entire time that Paul Jans was recording music, he was also a philosophy student in BC. And once he sort of got tired with that, he went and became a professor of philosophical theology. First, he was at Trinity Western University, and he's currently at King's College London, where he briefly ran the entire department and is now a chair of their graduate research thing. So to go from a Juno winner to a top 10 hit haver to a professor of theology is a pretty interesting career path. Congratulations, Paul Jans. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you learned a little something about the Juno Award for Breakthrough Artist. And if you want to find out who this year's Breakthrough Artist is, as well as the other awards that they give away, you can come to nationalpost.com. Take care.